Welcome to 7 p.m. on a Monday night, which is my favorite time of the week. Well, it's my favorite time of a Monday, even when it's snowing, because I'm inside and it's not snowing inside. Hey, Jill. And this week, everybody, Jill's back with me. I'm super excited. My name is Kevin Ham. I'm running for PSC District 5. Jill, I'll let you introduce yourself.
So I'm Jill Cohen, and don't adjust your screens. My computer settings have a problem. I will go super bright and then I'm going to disappear. And so I am running for House District 84 out here in Helena, in East Helena. And we are so happy tonight to have Sarah Novak. And Sarah, if you could introduce yourself and tell us where you're running, that would be great.
Sure. So I am the current representative for House District 77. I live in Anaconda, and my House District covers most all of Anaconda and all of Granite County. So it stretches quite a ways, and it's a good rural seat. Cool. And I'm running for re-election.
Good. Congratulations. I'm so glad to have you. Oh my God. One of my very good friends from Connecticut just got on and said, good luck to me. Thank you, Jean.
That's nice.
That's very sweet.
So, Sarah, we had the press release. Jill sent it to me. She's like, I have a press release for you, and sent it to me and then made me read it. Like I'm going to pay attention to things. And it was, of course, about the notification on the state hospital, which is in your district and is something you've been fighting for a lot. Do you want to start us off with kind of letting people know what's been going on there and what they can expect and what we're trying to fix?
Sure. So, the situation at the state hospital has been brewing over really a long period of time, and it's had its issues over time. And, a lot of that stems from staffing issues, which nobody in any entity in today's society is exempt from that in any way, shape, or form. But as you can imagine, working in the mental health field is a little bit more challenging than some of the others when it comes to staffing. We just don't have a good pool of psychiatrists across our state, whether it's for adults or for kids. There's nursing shortages, there's psych tech shortages. And in the last, I would say probably 6 months, it's really been an uphill spiral as far as just unsafe working conditions for the staff, unsafe conditions for the patients. There's been accusations throughout COVID and citations that COVID protocols were not in place or they were ignored. Most recently, there was a patient was assaulted. They had been placed on like an extreme jeopardy status with CMS and the Medicaid folks. And I think that there was just a thought that it wasn't serious, or they've been in that status before over the years, and they're always able to fix it. And so I think that the threat of losing the funding wasn't taken seriously. I don't think it was elevated to the level that there was a thought that CMS really would pull funding. And so while we saw it coming and we had warning that it would be coming, I think people are still surprised by that notification. I can tell you that over the last several months and weeks, they all kind of run together. But I've worked pretty close with the unions to try to just show support for the workers across the spectrum at the state hospital. And the stories that they're telling on a day-to-day basis are just gut-wrenching as far as the conditions that they're working under, positions not being filled. The vacancy rate is off the charts. And so, as you can imagine, as their safety goes down, in turn, it also affects patient care. And people are being expected to do the jobs of 4 individuals. And it's wearing on everybody. And no matter how many cries for help from management have been put out there, they've gone, I guess I would say, somewhat ignored. The state administration is really protected, the governor's office, and Director Meyer at DPHHS. They've really protected the management at the facility and neglected to take care of the needs at hand. And here we are today.
Yeah. So in our press release that we just put out, the Democrats put out today, they were talking about vacancy rates between 60 and 70% there. Mm-hmm. And that the hours of temporary contracted positions that they brought in have been 700% increased since January of this year. And so that's been my scare. I've said this a couple times on this show, that what we're watching is essentially the privatization of mental health services in the state of Montana. The workers, basically, they're sitting next to people who are making between 4 and 10 times their wages, and they don't have the level of responsibility because they're temps. They walk in there, they don't have the same training. They don't have the same responsibility levels that the people who actually work there. And I think we have been working as Democrats, whether that's Sarah locally or the interim committee that oversees DPHHS in this facility, have tried to get folks to pay attention to what's going on, number one. Number two, to put some money behind it. We have ARPA funds that can be used to actually backfill this. And we know that during the pandemic, we gave wage increases of $4 an hour to everybody that was working at the facilities. And I won't say that we maintained our level of staffing through that, but for most of it, we kind of did. And we just didn't see this decrease in this loss of workers that we've seen in just the last few months. It's been really, really hard to watch happen.
Yeah, and this question actually ties into that. I read today that the state hospital is $7 million over budget, largely due to paying traveling nurses and other similar staff at super high rates as full-time employees quit. How can they justify that expense while also insisting that they can afford raises for full-time staff to draw better and more talented full-time employees? The easy answer is they aren't bothering to justify it. They're just doing it. Mm-hmm. They've decided that they're not going to fix this problem. They're going to keep it open as long as they can. But now with the federal funding being pulled, it's a danger of closing, right? Mm-hmm. I'm not crazy.
Right.
No.
So what happens if it closes?
Well, what we read today, Kev, is that we essentially they're not going to allow new patients to go in there for it, like the last 2 days. They're going to stop that. And then they're not going to allow Medicare and Medicaid to pay for people to stay there after 30 days. So what do we do? Is exactly right. Sarah, do you know, any kind of plans?
I don't. My camera went off for some reason. I'm not sure why. It says I can't access it, but that's
weird. And you're frozen with your eyes closed. Do you want to dive out and dive back in, and we'll see if that clears it?
Sure, I can do that if you'd like.
Sure, I'm gonna bump you out and just come back in.
Sure.
We'll see if she comes back. But Jill, okay, so they're not justifying it as far as I can see. Everything I've seen from the governor's office and from DPHHS, the heads, they've been protecting the management, of course, because that's what they do, but they haven't done anything to address what they're going to do with the situation as it collapses. Is there a fail-safe in place that's supposed to make this come out some way, or?
Not that I know of. I don't think that I've heard of anything that they have plans to do. The only thing that I've heard in the last little while is that they hired a consultant or a contractor to come in for $2 million. I don't know, that was about 6 or 8 months ago, to come in and look at the whole situation and make suggestions for how it could possibly be fixed. And that was an outside entity again that came in to look at it. And they've made no suggestions. There is absolutely no suggestions being made by this person that we know of. But one of the things we could start right now with, Kev, is the fact
you're freezing now too.
lack of
yeah, you were freezing there for a second
still?
too, so I think you lost a little bit. I'm wondering if Charter's having some issues over in East Helena.
Yeah, that's possible.
I don't know. Sarah's back, but her camera is still not coming up.
Yeah, can you guys hear me okay?
We can hear you.
Yeah,
so
we
we'll
can
just
hear
do
you.
that. I mean, it looks
All right. Yeah, I apologize. It keeps saying that the camera is unavailable. So I don't know what happened there, but
Yeah. So
Don't know.
anyway,
Could be another.
you were asked a question. Sarah, what I was talking about is that we had that person that was contracted to come in and look over everything for $2 million. And what kinds of suggestions have we gotten from that? Absolutely nothing. And the one thing that the governor could have done through the interim committee is put some ARPA funds to back, basically to put that towards people's wages, so we could get people hired into these positions, so we could have the permanent people in place to basically take care of this. And they have been unwilling up to this moment to try to do that. And we have pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed and tried to get them to do it. So I don't know if you're hearing anything different, Sarah, but it would be great to hear what you're hearing from those union employees, and what do they say they need?
sure. So actually, I heard today that the consulting firm came in and started today, as was originally scheduled. And ironically enough, they were there to work on team building exercises. So it's really unbelievable to me. And as far as I know, today was the first day with the consulting firm. I think that they've had like meetings with them per se, prepping for them to come in, but today would have been the first day. So I really wasn't anticipating any feedback yet from that process. You know, the unions collectively together, we had a meeting a couple weeks ago, and really was just kind of a safe place for the employees to kind of voice their concerns and just let them know that, you know, as helpless as I feel, I feel for them, and I'll advocate and do whatever I need to and can to support them. And they were able to tell us really in real time what some of their needs are. And the unions put together a summary of that and sent it to the governor and Director Meyer. And so I would like to hopefully have some response from them on that. But, some of the things that are just the most basic as far as recommended professional development courses, certifications that one has to have in order to work there, that they haven't been providing. So the list included simple things like CPR and first aid recertification, MANT training, and restraints. Just the most basic of basic annual renewals that they would normally tell people when their renewal dates were coming up, and make sure that those trainings were provided, and none of that's even provided. Really just, they feel that it's such a dictatorship and that they're talked down to, and in some cases, and ignored in other cases. It's just, like I said, it's gut wrenching. They're doing the jobs of 4 individuals and then being belittled for what they're not getting done, or what they should be doing instead. And really through all of that, the one thing that I keep hearing is that they're so concerned about the patients. I think some folks, it's easy to look in and say, oh, they're not doing what they need to. Of course, things got happen. Nobody was there to even help the patients. And I think that's not the view per se that the employees have, and they do genuinely care for those patients, and they've developed relationships with them, and that's why they're staying in these positions. They don't want to leave. They're afraid of what's going to happen to their patients, and they are worried about patient care first and foremost.
Cab, we can't hear you, or I can't hear you.
If I unmute my mic, I put it mute on so that I can cough. And I, use tech every day and teach people how to use it. Anyway, from Cheryl Eagle, didn't they get COVID funds to help with the last couple of years that they could have helped pay for the traveling nurses? Is COVID why they needed traveling nurses, or is that just a regular staffing need? 3 questions. Take them away.
I would say it's been exacerbated by COVID. I think that there's always, in any entity, you're getting a backfill with traveling nurses. just those contract providers that are not regular full-time employees to fill the needs when you can't staff it because you have to have those coverages is really where that has kind of fallen into play. And you're correct. There was COVID money pumped into some salaries, and there was the availability to have that as an option to continue. And it kept getting shot down. In committee, as Jill said, the Democrats had brought that forward, and it dies on party lines. Essentially, is where that is. I don't know why they didn't use that funding to pay for the traveling nurses. I would almost. Part of me feels like it's part of the part of a media stunt or setting the stage for a privatization, that we set a narrative that there is no local individuals to work and fill those spots. And so then we have to privatize it with no other options. And I can tell you that I have friends, family, neighbors that work or have worked there. And I think if there was a switch in management, potentially some former employees would probably consider coming back because it was all about working conditions, why they left.
Well, and so I just dump in here too is, Cheryl, I think that one of the things we saw is we did need the traveling nurses, especially during the COVID stuff, because they had to quarantine people and they had, the quarantined area and the other area, and it really split up a lot of the staffing. And I think they really did need the help during that time. But what you've seen, I just quoted the number, 700% increase in contracted positions since January of 2021. I mean, some of that, yeah, but this most recent stuff is just they cannot fill the positions with regular staff filling of jobs and hiring people because they're not paying well enough. And so when you have a situation where you've got people that are the current workers that are sitting there doing the job, and somebody walks in is making 4 times the amount of money and has less responsibility, why would you stay there? It would be you'd probably have to be an idiot to stay there. Why wouldn't you quit, go to work for the traveling company, and then come back in and have less responsibility, and you'd be doing the same work for 4 times the wages? I mean, that's the way I'm looking at this. Is this was under Gianforte's. Our governor should have taken the reins and taken this very seriously, and he did not do that. And you can't just set up this inequity and then wait to see it all fall apart. And that's what I think he's doing. And Sarah, you're right on the money. I believe we are watching a privatization of a public service that is necessary to the state of Montana.
Yeah. And Jill, just to add to that, I would say, I think it's a double-edged sword with the traveling nurses. That's a big thing to swallow, to have your coworker that you're relying on and depending on for your safety and the patient's safety to be making that substantial amount more than you. But they've also, a lot of my constituents that work there have shared that they're also grateful for the traveling nurses, because without them, it would be even more complicated, and their workloads or what they can't get to would be compounded even more. And I don't know that they all have the availability to just quit and go work for the travel company. I think we look at it like, yeah, that would be, why would you stay there? But like I said before, the root of it is they love the work that they do. They love their patients, and they want to maintain those bonds, and they're feeling like they can make a difference at some point. And they're really sacrificing their own well-being oftentimes for the patients.
Yeah, to tie in with that one, we've got another question. Healthcare workers have been in the headlines recently for negligence leading to death and injury of patients in other states. When will we start seeing accountability for the management failures that led to the assaults and even death of patients? Good question.
It's $1 million question. I think, like I said before, that we've been hearing for months and months and months that management is the issue. And for whatever reason, management is protected, and that is not addressed. And so there needs to be some accountability. I don't know how you get to this substantial level and you lose funding through CMS and management still stays intact with no accountability. That is criminal, in my opinion.
Well, and so, Sarah, do you have any insight into what the next steps might be? I mean, there was some discussion that sometimes CMS throws this out as a threat and then yanks it back, but I haven't seen any movement by DPHHS to address any of this. I would imagine that we're probably seeing the downturn here, unless for some reason DPHHS and Adam Meyer and those folks in that department can do something quickly to address the issues.
Yeah, I mean, I would hope that they were working on it today. I know there were a number of individuals, not from the state administration level, working on it, but I keep saying state administration. I don't mean like the administration department. I mean the governor's office and DPHHS, and the governor's cabinet, I guess, is what I'm referring to by state administration versus the management at the state hospital. I don't know that anybody has those answers outside of CMS. And I think there are definitely a number of individuals attempting to find that answer. One of them is me, and it's really a waiting game. I think there are conversations being had and different people looking into things, but I think it's new territory for everybody, and we're not really sure what the next steps are. After yesterday seeing that and visiting with folks and looking into this, I couldn't even sleep last night, and I can't imagine the heartache and the uncertainty that is being felt by, one, the patients, and two, every employee out there. Mm-hmm. Not knowing if they're going to have care. I have deep concerns when I read language from CMS that here's links to help with the transition on moving those patients out, because I feel that there's nowhere to put them. I mean, there are very, very limited options. Yeah. And I fear for the conditions that those patients are going into. I fear for the lack of support system across our state. I fear for the workers and their livelihoods, their paychecks, their pensions. Everything is uncertain right now. And it doesn't seem to be, I heard last night there were individuals that were finding out about this that are employees there that saw it on Facebook. They haven't been addressed by management. And here today they have the consulting company in to do team building. I don't know how you team build in that type of environment.
Because you're not addressing the critical needs of the patients and the staff at that moment. The other thing I'm real concerned too, Sarah, is what's going to happen to the families. If there aren't a lot of good options here in Montana to take these patients, because a lot of times they're the ones that are criminally committed to the state hospital because they can't be in the prison setting because they haven't been adjudicated. And some of them might have been adjudicated, but they're mentally ill and can't be in the prison setting. So that's the reason most of those people are there. It's not all of them for sure, but that's the reason why a lot of them are there. So they're not the kind of patients that can be easily taken into a community setting in any way, shape, or form. So what are we looking at? Are families going to be looking to move their loved ones even out of our state so that they're not even going to get care close enough to be able to interact with them and to have contact with them? That's a huge concern for me and Montana families.
Mm-hmm. That is a concern for me, and I mainly deal, like in my everyday job, I deal with this with the kids, and there used to be agencies that it was a concerted effort to keep kids in Montana. And for a variety of reasons, there's a lot of kids that are being placed in out-of-state placements. That was just in the media not too long ago as well. And just the lack of care and availability for mental health in general. But when it gets to this crisis mode and they need support and stabilization to keep themselves and others safe, is a real need, whether that you're looking at the youth system or the adult system. And we don't have beds, we don't have facilities, we don't have wraparound supports. And it's frightening. I feel for the individuals that are in those situations. I feel for their families, their loved ones that are trying to help get them help and take care of them.
Yeah.
We do have this question, which I love this sort of thing. Would it be fair to characterize this issue as a bipartisan failure, or did these issues begin with Gianforte's term? And I'm going to kick in on here because I do know some of this.
Mm-hmm.
It has been an ongoing problem.
Yeah.
The state hospital, mental health has been an ongoing problem in not just Montana, but in the nation for decades. We can lay it at the feet of Reagan, starting with what he did in California and what he did as president. These have been ongoing problems. It gets worse every time we have leadership that doesn't care in the slightest about mental health issues and taking care of people and doing the right thing, because they let systems fail that they don't like. And so you have all throughout Bullock's two terms in office and all throughout the 2 terms that Schweitzer had, this was brought up as things need to be fixed, and issues would come up and they would get worked on as best they could and would get fixed, and funding would be found, and there would be fights, and people would put things in place and other people would take them out, and it'd be back and forth to get things done. But ultimately the hospital stayed open and it was there as a community service for the state. Mm-hmm. So it is a bipartisan failure in the sense that it's happened on everybody's watch, and everybody to some extent shares some culpability with it. It just happens to get far worse under the watch of the GOP as they choose to actively destroy it. And, one of the things that I heard today, because I saw the press release, or I saw the newspaper articles this morning, and immediately heard from friends, that are on the other side of the aisle going, well, this started with Bullock. It's like, no, it didn't. These were problems under Bullock. There were problems under Schweitzer. There were problems under Martz. There were problems under Roscoe. There were problems under, do I have to name every governor we've had? Because I can't. I wish I could, but no, it's not just any one person's fault or any one administration's fault. What is very much Gianforte's fault is the current failure, which is what's happening now. You can't blame Gianforte, or you can't blame Bullock for something that happened when you've been in office for 17 months.
Mm-hmm. And the fact of the matter is, when you see that 700% increase in traveling contracted services since January of 2021, I am not going to say that there wasn't contracted services before that, because like Sarah was saying, you always need that, when you've got people, when you're always on the edge of having enough people to do the work, and you have a few people leave for a new job, you've got to bring people in to kind of bridge that gap before you get the hiring done. And I think that in this case, it's been difficult to find the types of people that have the credentials that are necessary, because the state of Montana requires people to be credentialed to do these jobs. These are mental health providers who have licenses, and it's necessary for them to be those professionals to be able to do this job and take care of Montanans. And that's what we're looking for. I'm interested in the next question there, Kev, that as a former detention officer and a current attorney, I can attest to the manner in which government has turned mental health issues into criminal justice system issues.
Yes, I'm going to really quick ask Greg how to pronounce his last name, because if I can just put Shire on the end of it, I'm sure I can pronounce the sauce.
So that's fascinating, because when the place in Boulder actually closed down, I know that a lot of the patients that were out there at the Boulder facility ended up in the criminal justice system because they are not able to be in a community setting. And I think we're having some of those same issues with the state hospital, not all of them for sure. I think there's some ability to move some people out of there, but I think it comes down to not having enough money actually also, because that's the other thing. The state hospital is going to take the folks that need the care, whether they can pay or not. It's kind of almost like a school system where they take all kids. You can't just pick and choose who you take. But because of the ability to take Medicare and Medicaid funded patients, that's usually where they all end up. And so it's really, really difficult, basically, because this has been a longstanding problem, but it's definitely gotten so much worse. And the funding and the money has been available to get staffing into that place, and they have failed to even try.
Yeah, I would just jump in there. And I think these two questions really they bleed together for sure. And I would agree that I think it is a bipartisan failure in a lot of ways. And just to echo everything that Kev said, there's a history of this. And you look at what happened in Boulder with the MDC, and, it gets honed in on. And it's really easy, I think, for individuals to say, there's abuse. I'm not saying that there wasn't any abuse, but it's really easy to criticize the employees. And most of the people I've noticed, I think, that are most vocal about that would never walk 5 minutes in the shoes in those positions. And it's really hard. It's challenging for me. I take it to heart. I take it personally. I've worked with essentially the juvenile population in both a public school setting as well as in a residential facility, because those kiddos weren't successful in their home or school or their communities. And so I see that piece of it. And I understand where these workers are coming from, that they have a connection with the patients and that they love that line of work that they do. And I understand it takes a special person. And I think the piece with the criminal part is huge. It's easy for somebody to say, it's hard to tease out, like, was that part of their disability that caused them to act in that manner? Or was it a criminal act? And then they get locked up wherever the available bed is, whether it's a jail cell or a residential facility, to get that support. And our jails, or any of the sheriffs or the police chiefs around the state will tell you, our jail is full of mental health patients that are waiting for a bed, and they don't have that availability. When I met with the workers, that was one of their things was, they're fast tracking some of these inmates directly to Warm Springs in other cases. If they've got that in their history, they're sending them right there. So the attack that happened most recently, where the gal was attacked and life flighted to Missoula, that person, they talked about the lack of intake setup. So there's no longer like a Monday through Friday, this person was sentenced and they're transferred here and they go through an intake process. They're just getting dropped off. They're getting dropped off on the weekends. There's not an intake process, and they're sending them dangerous patients to the acute units. And that's what happened in this case, where if there would have been more protocol in place, that probably wouldn't have happened. So I do think that they bleed together. And then you see those cases, and whose fault is it? Is it that there wasn't the staff? Is it the judge's fault that signed the order to get him there and dropped off on the weekend? I mean, I think it's not a partisan issue. It's a societal issue. And where I do place the blame is that there were simple solutions, in my opinion, to address management, take actions on management, put them on a plan of improvement, put some oversight on management, take the accusations against management serious and from all parties. And that was the negligence. That's the failure. And that's where it falls on the shoulders of this administration, is to the extreme that we're at right now.
Yeah.
I really want to thank Greg for pointing out that, the costs, you can cut the costs for what you're going to fund. You're not going to cut the need. That's not how it works.
And it's a pay now or pay later.
Yeah.
Sorry, Kev.
And if you pay it now, it tends to be less money. I'm just throwing that out there. Also, apparently it's Worcester, which is great because I could never pronounce names like that, and it drives me nuts. We have another question from online, and it is very long, but I'm going to read it out loud. My child has been on a wait list for a year with no end in sight for a much needed psych evaluation following some pretty severe symptoms. Needed services can't be accessed until the evaluation happens. Where are parents supposed to turn to when our kids are hurting, but there's no help to be found? Who is going to lead the push to get more programs for kids funded? I can answer that last question. Democrats. Like,
Yes.
point blank. And one of the things that people are like, oh, well, that just seems like a pat answer. You're not actually doing anything. If we don't have power, we can't do anything. You don't vote for us, we can't do anything. If we don't have the resources in the lawmaking system, we cannot do everything. But if we get those, guess what we're going to do? All the things that you ask for, because that's what we want too. Ultimately, it comes down to, are we going to do the job that you put us in for and said that you want from us? Because these are the jobs that we think need to be done. And if you agree with us, vote with us. That's the simple answer for that last one. On the other one, how are we going to get services to happen in Montana? Take it away, Jill.
So there is some good news, I think, on the horizon, because one of the things that, and I want to let people know that there are some good Republicans. There are good people that care about what happens in Montana. I just think that there are so few of them in the legislative process that we end up not being able to do some of the things that are very necessary. But the old budget director that ended up leaving right after the last session was Kurt Alme, and he had he was very, very, the reason that he took the budget position under the Gianforte administration is essentially because he wanted to get more services for mental health for children. And so when he was able to pass the HELP Act, which would essentially add or the Health Act, I think is what it was called. And it was to basically take a lot of the marijuana tax money, $26 million, match that with money that comes from the federal government and boost it about 3 times, as I recall, and to be able to put that into our system to try to give additional services to children and to folks that are hurting out there. And that was really what Kurt wanted to do before he left government, and he got it done. And then he went back home to be with his family, which he was an amazing asset to our state for the short period of time that he was working. And I think that he did some really great work during the session to basically put some things in place that I hope will bear fruit as we continue through. The tax money for marijuana has been tremendous amounts of money coming in. So my hope is that a lot of that will get put out on the ground. We haven't seen that happen yet. I'm hopeful that after June 1, when we get into that next biennium, that money will start showing up in some of the communities across the state of Montana, and that community support systems, because I think some of that money, the Health Act would be grants to local communities, will be able to be out on the ground on behalf of some of these things. So my hope, whoever you are, I'm really hopeful that there will be some good things coming. And what you want is people in the legislature who can basically make sure that those things continue, and to come up with those new ideas that continue to help our communities.
Yeah, and I would just chime in. I think I can speak to some of the things that I know I personally have a hand in a couple situations. And that's mainly, I'm not on the Child and Family Service Committee, but in the education world. And there's a lot of efforts there on school-based services and how to integrate mental health services into the schools, and specifically with an emphasis on everyone. CSCT programs and the changes in those have been highlighted. Not all the schools have that anymore. But in my own personal experience, the problem with CSCT was that it was a limited scope of kids. So how can the schools take this on? Or, and that's part of it, is the staffing thing, but there's also some regulations as far as what the schools can hire and who can hire versus a mental health agency. I think that there's a lot of partnering going on. I know there's a separate work group, and that's my little cohort that I'm in is on the mental health one. So I think this next session, you will see some legislation coming forward on trying to open up the door for more mental health access for kids, both at a community level as well as through the school system. Whether we get that passed or not is a whole other thing. I think Kev's right. Traditionally, anything that is in the mental health realm, healthcare needs, and specifically anything education-wise, the Ds have all supported unanimously. And we work really hard with our partners across the aisle to garner support for that. So I do think, my heart goes out to whoever put that comment on there. I understand completely how those wait lists look. I just had a conversation about an hour before I jumped on here on that same topic of the wait list for the psychiatry or the psych evals. And I would just say, I hope that there are some resources in the community that can elevate that a little bit. Anytime that a child is in danger of hurting themselves or others, the best thing to do is get them to the emergency room and have the crisis response team do that evaluation, because that could trigger an inpatient stay in an acute setting, which in turn triggers a full evaluation. And sometimes I think parents are reluctant to take that step. Sometimes they feel like the communities they're in don't have those resources, but they are available. And I just think we need to do a better job too, making sure that all of our folks in every community across every little corner of the state knows what resources are available to them. So,
Yes.
Katie asked a question. Why do Montana's best advocates for mental health get kicked off the stream? I want to support these meetings, but you need real feedback. I'm assuming that Katie jumped off or something went sideways in what she was viewing, but we don't kick anybody off on this. She said, yes, I was let back in. So we didn't kick you off. It must have been some technical difficulties. Sorry about that. That's why we talk about rural internet is an appropriate thing to have, because we want to make sure that everybody can actually communicate across the state.
So I just want to say, Kev, can I just say that that's part of the reason why we're doing this, Katie, is to just let everybody ask the kind of questions that they want to. And we're not going to have the answers to everything, but we can at least tell you what we think and what we'd like to do and what our goal is and what we think the future should look like. And that's kind of what we want to continue to have these conversations with people who know things, like Sarah Novak, who is running for office and wants to come back. And she's an incredible advocate for children. She is an incredible advocate for public schools. She's an incredible advocate for mental health services because that state hospital is actually in her backyard. And that's the reason she knows what's going on and why it's so important. And she actually, Kevin, I asked her to jump on pretty last minute today, and she's such a trooper to jump right on like 1 minute before we started, I have to tell you, to join us tonight and help us answer questions around this and what it might mean for Montanans. So thank you, sir.
We've gotten another question through various other means, which was Montana was recently voted as the third worst state for working from home due to our horrible internet access issues. Is that a PSC issue? And if it is, what's the plan for fixing that? It's a Montanan issue. And so I definitely consider it part of the PSC. But one of the things that's happened, I'm going to take a little bit to talk now because you guys have had 45 minutes. I love you both. But,
go.
One of the things that happened in the last session, of course, we had the ARPA money come through, and they put together the Connect MT, which they put out a map for, and they've talked about how it's going to help rural Montanans connect to everybody. The big companies that are out there were not supposed to be a part of this. It was supposed to help small companies to connect rural Montana. So far, the companies that have applied for it are little companies like Spectrum, which is a multi-billion-dollar company, little companies like AT&T, little companies like CenturyLink, which is now known as Lumen, which is the second largest backbone provider in the world. So our piddly little $250 million that they put into this is being eaten up by companies who make $250 to $300 million a week. Which is sad because it means that little companies, and I'm upset because I have a company, Treasure State Internet. Full disclosure, we would like to apply for those funds because we would like to reach people that aren't getting served at all. We think that's very important. But what we're seeing is these companies that have massive resources at their time, they're taking this as a chance to buy their CEOs another third home as they continue to expand in other ways, because it really is just free money. They're at the point where they can invest in anything. And we warned about this. We talked about this. We brought it up to the people who put this bill together, that the way they've set it up sets it up for companies that have large resource pools of money, large cash lying around, to access this. And they didn't believe us. They said, no, that won't happen. And that's exactly what's happening. So, Katie, I understand your frustration as you're falling off the internet with a snowstorm coming in, and you're trying to make sure that everybody's entertained at home, and you've got the kids watching stuff and some kids doing homework, and another person maybe doing some work, and you're trying to watch this and maybe get a couple other things, and YouTube is streaming, and maybe Netflix is on somewhere, and so your internet is very active. And it's not all working well because the connectivity in Montana, even when you're in a city, is sometimes lacking. And when you're outside of city limits anywhere in Montana, yes, you're running into these problems. And it is one of those things where it's not directly a PSC issue because internet is not a regulated utility under the PSC. However, it is an issue for our legislators. And they're the ones who, when they got good expert advice from people like me in the business, ignored it because the people who had money leaned over to them and said, no, we should get it our way.
And just so you know, you lumped us all in there, Kev. And I would say that there's a lot of my colleagues that helped to kill this, but that was not me and Sarah Novak. Because I did know for sure that this was essentially the bill that was put forward in the session was going to pay these huge companies for what they're already doing, not getting them to do it better and in areas that were underserved. It basically we're giving them money to do what they were already going to do, which is to only expand in the areas where they want to. And so Kevin and I had a discussion because we've talked a lot about even the Helena area. The interesting things is up around what is that, Highland, and something up there is like a dead zone. Even some of the highest
South
cost,
Hills.
Yeah, some of the highest cost houses have no internet. So people are trying to find it out. I mean, it's just completely crazy to me that, anywhere around Helena would be suffering from not having a good internet connection, but they are picking and choosing even in town of Helena, whether or not they want to invest in it or not. That's crazy. And we've got all of these kids that are trying to do stuff from home. What we had to do during the pandemic, Sarah is a god with those kids and dealing with stuff, with what had to happen when kids went home for the pandemic. It's just insane. So, and
Sarah, how's your internet out in Anaconda?
Well, normally it's really good. So I don't know what's up with my computer here tonight, but we do have a lot of snow. So I'll blame the snow because I'm a little bitter about that. Even though we need the moisture, I'm ready for summer.
Let's all talk about the fact that weather has just basically been malaria.
But literally 3 minutes from my house, you lose cell reception. So when you head west, there's nothing between Anaconda and Georgetown Lake. Then you get to the lake and there's cell reception at the lake, and then you go to Phillipsburg and you lose it until you get right into Phillipsburg. And so along with that, the internet is also dicey through those areas. For work with the co-op, my special needs co-op, Beaverhead County is one of my counties that I serve, and rural Beaverhead County has really limited internet options and availability. There is no broadband by any means out there, and there's no cell reception through almost all the county. If you're in Dillon, you've got it, but outside of that. So our little schools, that was a huge challenge. And we relayed that time and time again to every level, from the state lawmakers to the federal lawmakers, telling our stories of what it's like in Wisdom or Hall, Ovando, all of our little areas that we serve. But there are some that there are miles and miles of lagging internet and lack of cell reception.
Yeah, one of the things that's interesting about cellular reception is that the licenses exist that cover the areas, the towers don't fill them, and there's no federal oversight that has said, hey, you have this license, you must have service that covers these areas. And when the FCC leans in on that sort of stuff, one of the things that I find is interesting that happens is you end up with Verizon or AT&T or T-Mobile or whoever pushing back with, oh, here's our coverage map. And it always amazes me because Western Montana looks like it's completely covered, but my district, which is Lewis and Clark, Lake, Flathead, and Teton counties, I cannot drive to the county seats in any of those from any of the other ones that have cell service the whole way, no matter what way I go. And these are Flathead's the fastest growing county in the state. Teton and Lake, they aren't super highly populated, but they are beautiful areas. Lake is stunning, just absolutely amazing. And it's one of those things, it's like, it is absolutely Instagram worthy. And then I get to go up next week. I haven't been back since last summer to Teton, but I get to go next week. So the snow better be gone. I get to go next week, and from what I remember last summer, it's just rolling hills leading into mountains in the distance, and it's just exactly what you are expecting for Montana. When people go, why do you love Montana? That's the picture that you want to send them. It's like, this is what I have. No people and absolutely the most stunning vistas ever. And you can take the picture, but then you got to finish driving 2 hours so you can upload it to Instagram. And that's the sort of frustrating thing where it's like, we have the tools in place. We just don't have the people that actually have the political will behind them, which is the voters. The political will always translates to what did the voters say? Then if the voters stepped up and said, we need to have these things. Yes, it's great that you have a license for this part of the spectrum that covers the entirety of the United States. You must fill that with towers. Yes, it's great that you've decided to take ARPA funds or CAF2 funds or RDOF funds. And I know nobody knows what those things are, but basically they're federal programs that give money to companies to build internet. If you've taken those monies and you haven't built what you said you were going to build, you don't get any more money. End of discussion.
Or give it back. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And those areas that you didn't complete in, somebody else gets to build in them. That's the way that it's gonna go now. And it's something that people need to understand, that political will comes from voting, and voting is not something that you skip. It's not something that you slag off. It's not something that you just forget about. And it's not something that you go, oh, I don't know any of these people. I haven't taken the time to learn this. I can tell you right now, if you haven't taken the time to learn who you should vote for, find somebody you trust. Because the people that you trust, the people that actually are invested in politics and go, hey, I'm actually worried about this thing, I'm going to spend my time learning it, we take the time to learn about all of the candidates. And there have been plenty of times in my life, I'm a proud Democrat, but that doesn't mean I've always voted for the Democrat. I've voted for plenty of Republicans in my life because they were the better candidate. They were the one who was going to get things done, that understood what needed to be done, and they weren't going to choose to be awful people. We are in a situation where there are moments where that is not the case, and you have to know who to vote for. And if you are not going to take the time to actually go out and do your own research on this one and meet the people, meet your candidates, come to these candidate conversations where you can actually ask us questions. I would like to point out every single one of these questions were either sent to us in our Twitter, sent to us in an email, or posted live online. We are not afraid to face you and have you come up and ask whatever question it is. Go for it. And it's important that you do that, because if you're not spending the time actually learning these things, then take the time to find somebody you trust who is doing that and can tell you who to vote for, because your vote matters. And if you want these things to actually be done, if you want good internet, if you want mental health care, if you want equity and equality to happen in your communities, you have to vote for those things. That's the thing that you must do. That is the social contract that we have with our politicians. And as Katie said, kids in school are more important than home entertainment, but it doesn't matter what it is that you're using the internet for. If it's not there, it doesn't work. It's not going to get you anything. So yeah, let's work for it. Let's make these things happen. But there's so many little places where we are falling down. And it's simply because on a regular basis, we have people who have chosen the easy way out rather than doing the right thing. Sorry, I just went on for a little bit.
So I know you got a box in that good way. But I was going to follow that up with, this is the time when we should talk about people not voting on their fear, right? You need to follow, you just vote on your hope. What do you want things to look like? Not having people in your ear telling you they want things, if they want change, you've got to vote for them who are feeling that change needs to take place. And I definitely want to give a few additional minutes here at the end for that kind of hopeful message from Sarah Novak. And Sarah, what do you see as things that you want to work on in the next session? What do you think are the things that you are going to be working on behalf of your constituents?
Well, I think I already addressed a lot of those. I mean, my main focus is always going to be on education, specifically special education. And really, in the special education world, it blends right into that mental health. And what is at what point do those merge together? But making sure that we're meeting the needs of all those kids. And obviously, the adult mental health world is near and dear to my heart, and I pride myself in being a big advocate for not just the unions, but just the working people in general, and advocating that everybody should have a right to go to work in a safe environment every single day. And so I would just say, finishing up as a freshman, you just kind of figure out how things really work by the time your term is over. So I'm looking forward to hopefully being reelected and getting to go back with a fresh perspective. And not that I wasn't ready to work by any means, but it was really weird coming in out of a pandemic where you didn't have the same level of access to things. I'm really proud of the work that I've done in the interim with the education committee. And I look forward to a lot of that work carrying over into potentially policy that we can get passed. And that committee particularly is a really great bipartisan committee. And so that's been fun to be part of. And I'm really proud of the work that we've done. And there's still a lot of work to be done. So that will continue forward, but really just helping to promote families to be able to live in the communities in Montana that they want to live in, that there's availability to be able to have a job, and that you can go to work because you have childcare for your kids, but you can live there and work there because you have a place to live. You have access to housing, whether it's renting or owning. There's so much work to be done as far as the housing crisis goes. That's a big piece to that. The shortage of workers we have is there might be somebody willing to take the job and there's nowhere for them to live. So just continuing that work, building strong families and strong communities, and advocating for my life I've spent advocating for those that don't necessarily have a voice and are more vulnerable citizens, whether they are our kids or our neediest population. And I'm proud of that work, and I look forward to continuing it.
Cool. I got one more to put up here because this is from Katie as well. Because this one is one that I love this question because I hate what caused this question to exist. Do you think more voters would curb that political will you spoke of? My understanding is if you don't own property in Montana, you cannot be considered a resident. I want my people who live in Missoula to have a voice. So owning property is not how you are determined to be a resident, to be clear. Now we have a representative who likes to put up that he represents the taxpayers of Montana. And I don't know who the hell he thinks he is, but he's wrong. Point blank wrong. He represents the people of Montana. And I don't care what Citizens United says. Corporations are not people. So this is a very simple thing to understand. So yes, do I think more voters would curb that political will? Absolutely. I know I'm part of Gen X. I sit in the tiny little bit in between the boomers and the millennials. And I'm sorry, millennials and Gen Y have a ton of power, and they need to come in their own because we can't do it alone. And as everybody steps up, let's make this stuff happen. Yes, the political will exists, and I want more people to have a voice as well. And if you don't use your vote because you think you don't deserve it, we need to go have coffee because I need to disabuse you of that notion, and you need to stop throwing away your power. And I'm happy to pay for the coffee too. So.
So
Either of you want to chime in on that one?
No, but we should say thank you so much for Sarah for joining us so last minute to talk about the issues that are going on with CMS and the state hospital. Thank you so much for jumping on as fast as you could tonight, Sarah. And this was awesome, good information for everyone. And I think that we will continue to do these, and hopefully we'll bring you back on a little bit later on in the season, Sarah, as things move forward.
Yeah, thank you both so much for the invite. It was fun, and sorry about my camera. I don't know what the heck was happening there, but thanks to everybody who signed on. This is good. Right?
So, if you'll stay on for a minute after we end the stream, everybody else, these streams are recorded. You can watch them at any time, and we have our blah, 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 blah. Let me try that in English. We appreciate every time you watch them. And if you are interested, or if you think anybody else would be interested, please share them out. That's very important as well. We are going to continue to do them on Monday nights. However, next Monday, I won't be here because I will be up in the Flathead for a candidate forum that they're having up there. So somebody else will get to play host, and we will be taking care of that. That'll be fun. And we will see. I will see you in 2 weeks, but we'll see everybody else next week. So stay on for a minute and have a good one. Let me see if I remember how to do all of my buttons.
Thank you all.